Welcome to the panel discussion entitled, What Justifies Society's Investment in Science and Engineering Research? The panel will be moderated by David Rubenstein. He's the co-founder and co-executive chairman of the Carlyle Group. David is a graduate of the University of Chicago Law School. He served as chief counsel to the U.S. Senate Judiciary Committee's subcommittee on constitutional amendments before becoming the deputy assistant to the president for domestic policy during the Carter administration. He also practiced law in both New York City and Washington, D.C. David Rubenstein serves as the chairman of the board of the John Kennedy Center for the Performing Arts, the Council on Foreign Relations, and the Economic Club of Washington. He is a fellow of Harvard Corporation, a trustee of the World Economic Forum, and a director of the American Academy of Arts and Sciences. He is a trustee of the University of Chicago. David Rubenstein is an original signer of the Giving Pledge, the host of the David Rubenstein Show, and Bloomberg Wealth with David Rubenstein. He's the author of The American Study and How to Lead. We are delighted to have you here, David. On the panel, we have David Axelrod, who is the founder and director of the Institute of Politics at the University of Chicago. David is also a graduate of the University of Chicago. He's a preeminent American political strategy and commentator, and the former chief strategist and senior advisor to President Barack Obama. He currently serves as the founding director of the University of Chicago's Nonpartisan Institute of Politics, and as a senior political commentator for CNN, where I am sure you've seen him on TV. He is the host of the X-Files, a top-rated podcast featuring in-depth conversations with public figures across the political spectrum. A former political writer for the Chicago Tribune, Axelrod produced media strategy and advertising for over 150 campaigns across the U.S., culminating in President Obama's historic election. David Axelrod is also the author of the New York Times best-selling memoir, Believer, My 40 Years in Politics. Now you will realize, many of my students here, that I'm breaking one of the rules that I always tell you not to break, which is when you're giving an introduction or a talk, first write it down, then memorize it, and then give it. But all of these individuals are so accomplished that it's impossible to memorize everything that they've done. So please excuse me. Let me continue reading my remarks. Our next panelist is France Córdova. She is the president of the Science Philanthropy Alliance and is a former director of the National Science Foundation. France Córdova is a leader in science, engineering, and education with an illustrious career in government, universities, and national laboratories. She has served in 5 presidential administrations, both Democratic and Republican. She's an international renowned astrophysicist with a record of accomplishments in space research and instrumentation. She has served on both corporate and nonprofit boards. As I said a moment ago, France Córdova was the 14th director of the National Science Foundation. Through her leadership at the NSF, the agency grew by over $1 billion. She strengthened existing partnerships and forged new ones. She launched strategic frameworks defined by 10 big ideas, promising areas of research for targeted investments. She initiated NSF's Convergence Accelerator, which leverages external partnerships to accelerate research in areas of national importance. To broaden STEM participation from traditionally underrepresented groups, she launched NSF Includes, and today, 7 other government agencies, including NASA and NIH, have joined Includes. Finally, our third panelist is my friend Walter Massey, who is the President Emeritus of the School of the Art Institute of Chicago and President Emeritus of Morehouse College. Walter Massey was previously Provost and Senior Vice President for Academic Affairs of the University of California System. Walter's distinguished career in academia includes serving as a professor of physics and dean of the college at Brown University, Professor of Physics and Vice President of Research at the University of Chicago, and Director of Argonne National Laboratory. He also serves as Director of the National Science Foundation, so we have two former directors. Walter Massey has been an advocate for issues surrounding minority students and education. He developed and directed the Inner City Teachers of Science program while at Brown University, and was also a founding trustee of the Illinois Mathematics and Science Academy. In the corporate sector, Walter Massey has served on the boards of McDonald's, Motorola, Delta Airlines, and chairman of the board of Bank of America. He has also served on the boards of the Mellon and MacArthur Foundation, and he currently serves as chairman of the board of the Giant Magellan Telescope, the board of the City Colleges of Chicago, and is a senior advisor to the president of the University of Chicago. Thank you all for being here. David, the floor is yours.
We obviously have a trifecta of superstars, and so all of you are very accomplished. All of you probably feel inadequate in front of these incredible people. So why don't we just start with France, who I've known. She and I served together on the Smithsonian board for a number of years. France, when I was growing up, one of my favorite characters was Pluto, and then the astrophysics of the world said there's no more Pluto. Why is there no Pluto?
Oh, science both elevated Pluto and then changed Pluto's designation. Of course, there was a lot of school children who learned there were 9 planets and were very fond of Pluto because it's way out there and it's small and you feel, it's cuddly because it's little. It comes after all these big ones. And it has this big moon that's half its size and so on. But further science more recently showed that it was actually didn't fit people's growing definition of what constitutes a planet. And in fact, it looked like a lot of other bodies way out in what we call the Kuiper belt that surrounds the solar system. And so there are several other Pluto-like objects. In fact, there are many, many now. So they're called dwarf planets. That's kind of a compensation for just calling it a plain old dwarf or something, but calling it a dwarf planet just and so are the others designated like that. But there are definitions. There's lots of discussion and arguments. Some people actually refuse to accept that Pluto's not a planet.
Where do you come out on this?
Where do I come out on it? Pluto is where it is, and it's.
All right.
I thought I was a politician.
All right.
It's a great body to visit, and it's got some. And since we've flown by it and taken some great pictures, it's an interesting body of the solar system.
So, as an astrophysicist, can you tell us what's the likelihood that there is any UFOs have ever visited us? Because it would take, how long would it take for a UFO to come from someplace where life could really exist? It would take 200 years at the speed of light or something, right?
Yeah, it would take a very, very long time. People figure that even getting to the closest star that has maybe a habitable planet, the Alpha Centauri system, which is about 4 light years away, it would still take a satellite like Voyager 73,000 years to reach there. So going at the speed that it's going. So yeah, so the distances are huge, and the speed of light is a big speed limit.
Do you believe in UFOs?
Do I believe in UFOs?
Now, you live in New Mexico.
Yeah,
and,
that's true.
Now, in New Mexico, supposedly there were some UFOs.
Yeah, in Roswell, yeah. So, do I believe in UFOs? Do I believe that somewhere in the universe there are UFOs? Absolutely, there are unidentified. Okay. Whether there's some locally, there are unidentified flying objects, but that doesn't mean that they're from other civilizations.
Okay. So Walter, let me ask you a question. So you were a theoretical physicist, right? So when
where does this go?
If you had a chance to, if Albert Einstein had never lived, would we be worse off or better off? Did he really do anything that somebody else wouldn't have come up with eventually, or did he really do something that without his being alive, we would never have actually gotten where we are in civilization? So where do you think he is?
Well, we wouldn't have had a reason to build LIGO.
Okay.
If I laser interferometer gravitational wave observatory, detected gravitational waves that Einstein predicted almost 100 years to the month that they detected them. So
You
France
oversaw-
and I wouldn't have been able to spend money at in itself if Einstein hadn't lived.
All right, so we have gravitational waves. We now know that they really exist, but why does anybody care? What difference does it make? Why does it really make a difference?
It's a good question, and it makes a difference because I think that people get excited about learning how the universe really works. Even if they don't really understand it, they get excited about thinking that they understand it.
Okay, so when you went to Morehouse and you majored in physics and math,
I did.
and then you got your PhD at Washington University.
I did.
So how many black theoretical physicists were there at the time you were doing this?
When I got my PhD in 1966, there were about 20, and we all knew each other.
And what did your family say when you said, I want to be a theoretical physicist? They say, is that what you want to do? Why don't you go into private equity or something?
Of course, people wanted me to be a doctor, and so I became a doctor, but my mother would say, well, he's not a real doctor.
I see. Okay. So, David, you were I was a graduate, undergraduate major in political science. You were a political science major?
I was.
Why do they call it science? Where's the science in political science? Really?
It's a really good question. Before we do that, I have a question for you and a question for you. The question for you is, hearing your question to Walter, did what happened to you, you wanted to be a theoretical physicist, and your family said, why don't you go into private equity?
They did. That's what they said. Now, my mother wanted me to be a dentist, and I tried to convince her I would get arthritis in my fingers so my career would end. But my mother wanted me to be a dentist. Fortunately, I got rid of that
I want
idea.
to know, France, from you, if these UFOs arrived here and turned on cable news, would they beat a quick retreat back to where they came?
I can't answer that question. I don't, how intelligent would they be?
Yeah.
That's the question.
Less
Right.
so if they
Compared
watched
to
Yeah.
compared to us, or compared to, well, anyway. So why is political science a science? Is it an art or is it a science, really?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. I mean, there are measurable things about
I need to get my
attitudes
cushion.
that have applications that I guess you could call a science.
Okay.
I never thought of it that way. I never, in fact, the word science and I didn't get along very well.
Thank you.
It makes me nervous.
I got a bad back.
Well, you
I'm
wrote.
astonished to be with these great scientists, and the only people who would be more astonished were my science professors when I was a student in college.
Well, when you wrote on your autobiography, you say you barely graduated. You got the final credit at the last minute, but
I was mostly doing
You were doing journalism?
You know what? This will help. How's this? Better? Sorry. That's what happens when you
so
have...
you barely graduated, but you graduated.
I did, yes.
all right.
I did. It said so on my tag when I came
Okay,
in.
so let me ask you this. I've always wondered this. There's a man who was an untenured, not tenured professor at the University of Chicago. He had lost 2-1 in a House race, and then he said, I'm going to run for the United States Senate, and you should be my advisor. And then later he said, I'm going to run for president, and you should be my advisor. Did you tell him he was a little bit crazy?
No, I didn't. And
Why not?
because I didn't think he was crazy.
Okay.
I mean, yes, he lost a race for Congress narrowly by 30 points 2 years before he decided to run for the Senate. And he called me and he said, I've talked to Michelle, and I've got one race left in me, and I want to take a shot at the Senate race. And he started off as a kind of highly admired third-tier candidate, but he was right for the moment. He was right for the moment. And that was true in the presidential race as well. And, my job was to analyze the environment and see if he was, if his profile and his message was one that would carry, and it did.
Did he think he was going to get elected president the first time he ran for president, or was he going to just take a trial run at it and see what happened?
No. That wasn't the case at all. He was running to win. And I told him when we talked about it that my concern for him wasn't that he would lose the race, it was that he would win, and that he had no conception of what that would mean for his life and his family. But no, absolutely, we thought he had, for a variety of reasons, which I could go into at length, why he was the right person for that moment.
At what moment in that campaign did you actually think he was going to win?
When we won the Iowa caucuses. That was the...
And after New Hampshire, you didn't get nervous?
Well, I can't say that.
Okay.
But Iowa was sort of proof of concept. There was a state that was over 90% white. And he was able to carry that state, and that activated a whole lot of people, including black voters across the country who now believe that he could become president.
So, France, we went to the moon initially in 1969, and we looked around. There's no other people there that we know of or anything else. Why do we really want to go back there? What's the point of going back to the moon? Is it really worth spending money to go back to the moon? For what purpose are we going to go back?
Well, there's it's all about exploring and seeing what we can do. And I mean, there are people who talk about resources there, of course, in mining resources, and as an astronomy platform, of course, there are some aspects of it that would be great for doing better observations of the universe. But it's really more about carrying it that it's in our nature to be explorers. So why do we want to go to any place that's unexplored? We want to see what's there tangibly. We want to experience it. We want to see what we can do with it. And part of it is just being really curious about that we don't know all the things that we can do to a place until we go there.
So would you go up in space now if Richard Branson or Jeff Bezos said, come up, or Elon Musk, would you go up on one of those vehicles?
I would go up if we were going somewhere like to the moon or Mars. I wouldn't go up to...
Okay. But to go to Mars takes 6 months.
It takes, well, at best, yeah.
At best,
It can take longer, too.
But right now we have some wealthy people deciding what our space priorities are. You were the chief scientist of NASA, and NASA used to be deciding, here's what we're going to do. Why are we letting some wealthy entrepreneurs, nothing wrong with wealthy entrepreneurs, I suppose, but why are they getting to decide where we're going? Why isn't the government deciding?
Well, for a long time, the government was deciding, right, and spending the big bucks to do the exploration, doing low Earth orbit, and then thinking about concepts beyond, of course, and going to the moon and launching vehicles to Mars. But it's been a dream for a long time to involve commercial industry to do this, and especially in low Earth orbit, and to get more people excited about the opportunity of going into space. And so why shouldn't we? And it's only natural that the people with the money could be able to develop these enterprises. That's the way it's always been. It doesn't mean that they own space or they'll set space laws or regulations or traffic or industry, but it means that they get the opportunity to be the pioneers.
Now, at one point in your career, you were going to be an astronaut, is that right?
No.
I thought you were training to it. I thought you told me you were training to be one.
No. I always wanted to be a research scientist. So when I had the opportunity to be proposed for the program by my advisor, who had he had an instrument on one of the space shuttles, and so he was allowed to propose. Somebody asked me if I'd like, and that was in the very early days, and if I'd like to be an astronaut. And I thought, oh my gosh, you've got to be kidding, because I've worked so hard to become a research scientist, and I thought that would just take you literally away.
I thought you were an English major or something, weren't you?
I was an English major as an undergrad.
Right, right.
Yes.
I thought people should know that. I think that's a great
Walter,
story.
of all the many jobs you've had an incredible number of jobs, you've run an enormous number of organizations. Which one was the best one?
It depends on best, but my favorite Obama story is after he got elected in the middle of the financial crisis, et cetera. That was this Onion magazine, this satirical magazine, said, "Black man gets worst job in America." That about summed it up, I thought. I've enjoyed all of my jobs. I think the most satisfying was being president of Morehouse College, because I went to Morehouse College, and I went from a small town in Mississippi out of the 10th grade to Morehouse, and Morehouse College has really changed my life. And to be able to go back as president was fantastic, and for people who don't know, it's a historically black college, all male, but that's not the big thing. It's historically black, and it just plays a special place in American higher education. Martin Luther King is probably our most famous alumnus, but Spike Lee is maybe just as famous.
But you were the chancellor or provost at the University of California system, is that
Correct.
right? So that's one of the biggest systems in the United States for education. To go to little Morehouse College afterwards, that you didn't say, hey, this is too small for me?
Yes. When they first started recruiting me, I'd only been provost I was on my second year at California, and my wife and I, when we moved to California, we sold our house here, sold the house in Santa Fe to buy one house in California, and we were never coming back until the Morehouse alumni started recruiting me back, and I felt I owed it, and turned out to be one of the most satisfying jobs I've ever had.
Without disparaging scientists, it seems like many scientists are focused on scientific discovery, which is what they're supposed to do. It's often the social scientists or humanities people who focus more on some social issues. But you, unlike many scientists, you've been involved in a lot of social issues. Was that to the detriment of your science career? And did other scientists say, Walter, focus on the science and don't worry about helping poor black kids get educations?
It was a major decision. I was here in Chicago. I was a postdoc at Argonne when Martin Luther King was assassinated. I lived right there at Drexel, right here, 5600 Drexel. And that really sort of changed my perspective because I was at Argonne and I was doing research, 1968. And that's it. I wasn't teaching, and the civil rights movement was whirling around, and I felt until then that I wasn't contributing anything. And so I fortunately got an offer to go to the University of Illinois, Urbana, and I figured if I was on a college campus, I could get more involved in these social issues, and I did at Urbana. And Urbana also had the best condensed matter theory group, I think, in the country then, and that was my field. So when I went down there, I got involved in science education. I went to Brown and started a program to train science teachers for inner city schools. And it was a conscious decision when I was at Brown, became dean of the college, to really do more in the public space, administration, and try to balance that with physics. And then when I came to Argonne, became director of Argonne, I really decided that science administration was something that I really enjoyed doing, and I could have an impact on society more than I could focusing narrowly on my physics research.
So if you had a chance to have dinner with Albert Einstein, what would you like to ask him?
I would ask him, does he really believe in entanglement?
Okay. So
I don't think he would.
now, are those astrophysics socks, or are those very colorful socks? Is that specialty, or is that the stars, or what is that?
That's correct. These are my giant Magellan telescopes.
Oh, okay. So why do we need the Magellan telescope, honestly? Why do we really need that? I mean, it's pretty expensive, though.
Well, we're going to find if they're UFOs. Not really,
Okay,
but one of the things will be to look at what are these exoplanets to see if they really have conditions for life as we understand life to be here on Earth. That's one of the big things. The other is to look for science. This telescope will see almost to the beginning of the universe. It will be able to detect sort of first light, to be able to see how the universe developed, how it evolved, how galaxies were formed. And as far as some of these things, you don't have an immediate practical purpose. They're just some of the most exciting things you want to know, how we got here, how the universe was formed.
But you believe in the Big Bang Theory, right?
On a good day.
On a good day. Okay. So, David, you started the Institute for Politics at the University of Chicago. Are the students that are now part of that, are they jaded about what's going on in Washington? Are they still as idealistic as we were when we were younger? Or are they just kind of saying, I just want to learn more about politics, but I'm not going to go into politics because of the dirty business?
Well, first of all, you and I came through the 60s. I wouldn't necessarily say that.
We were idealistic, weren't we?
We were idealistic, but also very skeptical.
Right, okay.
And I think they are as well. I always say if I had to do it all over again, I would not name this the Institute of Politics, because the two things these young people are most skeptical about are institutions and politics.
Well, you can change the name.
No, I don't know. It's sort of branded.
All right.
now.
Okay. So
But let me intervene for one second.
Ahead.
I have to do this. I have to do this because my friend Bob Zimmer is sitting here, and I very much remember sitting down with him 10 years ago to talk about bringing the Institute of Politics here. And I've been a student here, and my big concern was how something as sort of, I don't know, prosaic in some people's minds as an Institute of Politics would be received on this campus. And Bob said, no, I believe really strongly that we need to be about more than the life of the mind. We've got to be about the life of the world. And he started talking about this Institute of Molecular Engineering and how excited he was about it and how it was an example of what he wanted to do. And he offered that as a reason for me to believe that I should bring the Institute here. So here we are on the 10th anniversary, and Bob, your vision has been realized in spectacular fashion with help from Tom Pritzker and others. And I just want to say thank you for that.
Okay. Didn't mean to hijack your... No, but the people who go into the Institute of Politics, are they interested in going to government in Washington, or they just say, I'm just going to do this for a little bit?
You know what? If I could, I would call it the Institute of Changing the World, is what I would like to call it, because I think what they want to do is have an impact. They believe that they should be about something larger than themselves. They want to attack some of the great problems we face. And my job is to persuade them that the political system and our democracy offers us tools to make those changes.
So in Washington today, it seems that Democrats and Republicans don't even talk to each other, let alone socialize with each other or work on legislation together. Is it worse than it was when you got into Washington, or is it about as bad as it was then?
Well, I think when we arrived there, it was pretty raw. We had won a big victory. Republicans had made a decision that they were going to let us govern on our own. You remember President Obama had some pretty pitched opposition. But I think, we've gone through some other changes since then. And yes, I think politics are raw, or it's harder to find partners. There are strident voices on both sides that oppose any kind of cooperation. These are difficult times.
I see you on CNN a lot, but how do they call you an hour in advance and say, show up at the studio? How do you know when you're going to be available? You have to be available all the time? Do you have a studio in your home or something?
Yes, so if I bolt out of here...
Okay, something big is happening, right?
You'll know why. Generally they'll call you that morning, but I know, if there's a big event. I was just in New York for the, kind of odd, but I was in New York for the California recall discussion. When there are big events, then you know you're going to be there, and otherwise you're on a kind of an on-call basis.
Okay, you know President Biden pretty well.
I do.
So were you surprised he decided to run at this age and get elected?
Yeah, well, when we chose him to be our vice presidential candidate, I distinctly remember someone saying, well, and he's 65, he's certainly not going to run for president at 73. And we were right, he didn't run when he was 73.
Okay. So does he call you up and say, got any good advice about what I could do these days?
He does not. He does not. I mean, I was one of the people who was skeptical about his running. And I was wrong about that, honestly. I now look back and think that he was probably the only Democratic candidate of the 20-something running who could have won that election. But I was skeptical about it.
So I'm an only child. You are the oldest of 12 children, is that right?
That's right.
So what is it like? Do you have to be responsible for all the 11 when you're growing up, tell them what to do, or how does that work?
Well, it's not cheaper by the dozen, that's first. I think it's probably the most seminal part of my background as being the oldest of 12 children, because they just came one right after the other. And we're all Irish twins, they call you. As if you're
what?
Irish twin, they call, if you're less than 1 year apart, so that's just that's a term of art in that business. So we were closely spaced, let's say, and so I was like a little mom, and so you said, David, to me earlier today, if you want to tell the audience what your grandchildren call you?
Well, that's boss, or grandpa boss, or something like that.
Yeah,
But,
grandpa boss.
But
Okay,
what do they call you?
So I was,
What do you get
so
called?
I was boss.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
So you were the
which my
boss.
husband still calls. So, yeah, and so my parents were very religious, so they were often out of the house doing their religious things. They belonged to some group that was very interested and busy outside the home. And so I really was raising, and I never even thought I'd have kids of my own after that experience, but I eventually did. And yeah, so it was pretty intense. But you know, when you're little, you don't think that your world is different than anybody else's world.
All right,
I
so
thought
how many-
everybody had
How many nieces
12
and
children.
nephews do you have now? You must have a lot.
A lot, you know, in the 30s or 40s.
You went to Stanford, right?
Right,
Undergrad, and you were
right.
English literature?
Yes, major.
So how did you get a PhD in astrophysics from Caltech after you were an English literature major at Stanford?
Well, when I got my degree, and I actually won a writing contest, so I went back east to work for a magazine, and I saw a special on public television about neutron stars, which had just recently been discovered, and I just was absolutely memorized. That was a transformative moment, which is why I believe everybody should support public television, because I was in Cambridge, Massachusetts, and when I saw that, I hopped on a bus the very next day, went down Mass Ave to MIT and knocked on the door of somebody who was featured in that special, and I said, you know, I'm not very busy. Can I have a job here for the summer? And so he talked to me for a while, took me over to the Center for Space Research, and somebody there, a professor, hired me to do some work. Little did I know that, because he only told me years later, the real reason he hired me was because an English major from Stanford had walked into his office at the very moment he was wondering how he could edit the first article on X-ray astronomy that was going to appear. And he thought, wow, this is, you know, somebody's coming and working for practically nothing. And so anyway, so they gave me a job, and the three professors all decided to hire me as a graduate student at large at MIT. And then I went over to Caltech because I just wanted to be home.
Well, it's just not that easy to get into Caltech. You have to apply. It wasn't that easy.
Well, no, I didn't. I knocked on the door of, no, I'm good at knocking on doors. So I knocked on the door of somebody who later turned out to be my advisor, and I said, you know, I read your articles, because I was helping this professor at MIT write his review article. So I knew who he was, and I said, you're an X-ray astronomer. I want to be an X-ray astronomer, and can I work for you? And can I audit courses, because I don't have much of a background. So he handed me this book. Some of you will know who Chandrasekhar is, a Nobel Prize. He said, here's this book on radiative transfer. Can you program that for our rocket flights? And so I said, I'll try. So I had no idea, and so some students gave me a Fortran 4 book, and I went at it, and they helped me. And I audited courses, and I did fine in the courses, and so the professors all had a little vote, and they decided to admit me to graduate school there. They just said, don't take the GREs because you'll never pass.
All right, but when you got your PhD in astrophysics from Caltech,
Yeah.
how many Latino surnamed women astrophysicists were there in the United States?
Well, there were none because the word Latino wasn't invented yet.
Okay. So, Walter, after Sputnik, the United States went in a frenzy that the Russians were going to be way ahead of us in science, and we began to do a lot more scientific-related government funding, I'd say. Are we right in being concerned that the Chinese are now doing what the Russians did to us before, but scaring us into thinking we should do much more, or are we way ahead of the Chinese in all kinds of basic science research, and do we not need to do much more than we're already doing?
Doug, me?
Yes.
Oh, no, we're not. Well, we're ahead probably of the Chinese in volume in terms of the sort of overall excellence in the number of fields we're in. But in particular areas, I think they're catching up, coming very fast. The reason, Sputnik, I was thinking about Sputnik. We need another Sputnik as far as I'm concerned. We need another seminal event like that to spur the nation to really make major investments in science and in science education. I mean, at the lower grades, to high school and college, to get more Americans into science, I think. And so Sputnik is really, they had something called the National Defense Education Act, which was a response to Sputnik. And that's what I went to graduate school on, an NDA fellowships. So the Chinese are doing us a favor, I think, if they are, in fact, alerting us that we need to invest more. And I think this, I don't know the name of what they're calling the new bill now. It was the Schumer's bill.
It's called the Endless Frontier.
I thought they changed the name.
Well, it has another name
Has
now.
another name.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
I think
The
that's
House
a
has its own name.
fantastic response to not so much the Chinese threat, but to the recognition that we need a sizable increase in investment in science and technology, and the kind of thing we were talking about here today, really translational science. Now, I hope we don't forget we need to keep investing in basic research, because as Tom pointed out, we are living now on a lot of investments of the 20th century, but that won't go on forever. We have to keep investing in both.
Right. So when you were a graduate student and later a professor, there weren't that many black theoretical physicists or that many people African American in science. Has it gotten much better in recent years? Are you worried that we're not getting African Americans going into science?
Yes to both questions. Yes, there are many more. As I say, I knew every black PhD when I got my PhD. I do not now. There are a number of African Americans and Latinos now going into science, physics in particular. A lot of women, which I've been very pleased about. I've been in contact with a lot of graduate students who are in the sciences. But we haven't really progressed as much as we should have. We haven't gone anywhere near where I thought we would be when I started out, say, at Brown. And I mentioned Brown because when I went to Brown, I was the first African-American. Well, I wasn't African-American then, I was black. We became Afro-American, then became African-American. I used to be colored before that. You have to end joke. Anyway, I was the first black professor at Brown, and now there are two black professors at Brown. That's 1970, 41 years later. So we've doubled the number of professors at Brown. But Brown is ahead of practically every university in the country. There are very few other universities that have even two black professors of physics. So to answer your question, we've come a long way. We've come much less distance than I thought we would be and where I think we need to be.
So for each of you, I'd like to ask you the same question. To be very serious about it, science is something that we all are educated as young people to kind of believe that science actually tells you what the facts are. Why is it that members of Congress seem to be unwilling to say that the vaccine is good for you, and a lot of politicians are running around saying, don't wear a mask, don't take the vaccine if you don't really want to? Are we in that bad shape in Washington, D.C., that people can tell you that the science doesn't matter anymore?
Yeah, this is a perilous time for us because science relies on provable fact, and if facts become fungible, then we have a problem, and it's alarming to see scientists become, climate scientists, but now we see, scientists, Dr. Fauci has security. His family has security because he is asserting what science has told him, the evidence has produced, and that has made him, scientists are now being lumped in with a governing elite telling people what they have to do, and it's really, really worrisome.
Well, when you talk to some politicians, I don't know if you talk to Republican politicians that
do.
much. All right, in private, they say, "Look, I know we need to take the vaccine. I know we should wear masks, but it would hurt me politically."
Yes.
Is that what they tell you?
Yes, and you see
any specific names you can mention?
And you see, I'd like to have future conversations. and you see politicians, for example, the governor of Arizona. He certified the election. This has made him persona non grata within elements of his party, and now he is championing the anti-mask movement in the schools there because he's trying to win back the favor of the group that he lost.
Yeah, can I give another example of what David's talking about? So with respect to climate change, I took 10 congressmen to Antarctica because NSF runs the 3 stations in Antarctica on behalf of the country, including the only one at the South Pole. And I wanted them to see firsthand. There's nothing like just being with people in a close, kind of intimate situation, hearing from the scientists. There were a lot of young scientists at these facilities that told them about the research they're doing, what they're finding. They were completely different people than when they're on the Hill. Completely different. I think David will agree with me. They also, oh my gosh, they asked great questions about the changes that were going on with the glaciers melting and the just also microbes that they were sampling and seeing, and all the changes that are going on in Antarctica. Then I took a group of about 10 or 12 to Greenland in the Greenland Summit, and as you know, they experienced the first rain there this summer ever in their history, and they have the first mosquitoes there on the coast of Greenland that they've ever had because the changes are so severe. Again, they asked excellent questions, and then they, when you talk with them around the table, the breakfast, lunch, dinner tables for 10 days, they're all just different than when you get them back home. Then they completely change because of their electorate in order to get elected.
Walter, I mean, are you saddened by the fact that people who are serious scientists, serious politicians and leaders of our country are telling people, don't wear a mask?
Well, much more than saddened, distressed about it, frightened about it, I guess, because it's hard to understand that they don't see that they're putting people's lives at risk. I mean, that it's not a game. And it's hard to get inside their mind really to see what it is that's driving them. Is it, lust for power that strong? And what's the power anyway? Many of them are not getting actually that much power, that much influence in these jobs that they have. But with science, the political science, the social sciences, the psychology. I think a lot of these questions about how the public thinks about science, we need to bring in other disciplines to understand that, so we as scientists can try to understand what we need to be saying to the public. And in fact, there's an interesting study been done recently by the American Academy of Arts and Sciences to look at what the public thinks about science and why they think that way. And I recommend it to you guys here who are going to have to explain about how you make artificial proteins, and you're going to get the same reaction probably they got from genetically modified foods. All of the things that you're doing that are so exciting to you and us as scientists, I don't think we can take for granted that the public is just going to accept them as being that exciting. I mean, we have to start thinking more about how we talk about this to the public.
I agree with that, and I would just say to all of you, and President Alivasatos and I were just talking about this, the march of technology, science technology, is increasing exponentially all the time. And it's creating a sense of change. It's also creating ancillary effects that we don't entirely have our arms around. One of the reasons we have the situation we have on vaccines is because we now have social media in which messages are shared and micro-targeted to people who are receptive to them, who are told outlandish conspiracy theories about what vaccines would do, who are aroused around the issue of masks. I saw a T-shirt today that said, if you don't have to wear a mask because God will protect you, why do you have to carry a gun? Which I thought was a pretty lancing question. But I'm just saying that one of the challenges for us moving forward, because of the pace of technological change, is how do we get our arms around the societal implications of it? And then the second thing, and then I'll shut up, I worry about the pace of change increasing rapidly, more rapidly all the time because of exponential technological advances at a time when we're deeply divided and government is moving more slowly than ever. So you have a lumbering government and fast-paced change that unsettles people. It's one of the reasons we have, I think, the churn we have in our democracy.
So, final question for each of you relating to the University of Chicago. How would your life be different had you not gone to the University of Chicago? And how did you wind up going to here? You grew up in New York. How did you come to the University of Chicago? It's not that it's that far west, but how did you come here? And how would your life be different, have you ever thought, if you hadn't gone to the University of Chicago?
Well, I could lie about this. Obviously, I knew it was an excellent university. It was in a city. I came in part because it was the last of the big city machines. Here was 4 years after the Democratic Convention. I was fascinated by politics. I thought it would be great to be in this city. There also was the wisdom of my homeroom teacher who told me to choose a school at least 600 miles from New York City so my parents wouldn't surprise me with a visit.
Okay. All right. So with all the distinguished academic institutions you've been associated with, how did you not become a professor at the University of Chicago? How did you avoid that?
Well, I wasn't made an offer.
Well,
that's because Bob wasn't here.
Take care of that. So, okay. So, and Walter, of all the great institutions you've been involved with, is the University of Chicago clearly the best of them all?
Definitely.
Absolutely. Okay. All right. Well, I want to thank you for a very interesting panel.
I'd like to thank all of the speakers and the students over the last 2 days. Too many to name individually, but thank you all for being here. You know who you are. I also want to thank all of the staff that helped us organize this event under really difficult circumstances that continue to keep changing. Thank you all for all of your hard work. I have enjoyed the great privilege of traveling on PME's trajectory from the very beginning. We set ambitious goals for our first 10 years, and I think we have achieved many of them. Today, thanks to the hard work and partnerships with many of our friends, not only here in Chicago, but throughout the world, we have achieved something very special for molecular engineering. We started small, but we grew quickly. And through the scale of the partnerships that we have, for example, with the national laboratories, we've been able to do extraordinary things, like, for example, launch the longest quantum loop in the country, or convert carbon dioxide to fuels, or purify water at large scales using solar energy. These are just a few of the examples of the things that we've been able to accomplish. As the PME grows, we will continue to build on the unique themes that we have in arts and sciences and technology, immunoengineering, materials for sustainability and health, and of course, quantum engineering. We have achieved a lot in a short decade, and of course, there's a lot more to come. I would like to end on a bit of a personal note. Bob mentioned at the beginning that the faculty who came here took great risks in coming to this completely new place. And yeah, it was a risk. But of course, we all took that risk, and we took it for 4 very simple reasons. I think I speak on behalf of all of my colleagues when I say this, and the students. First of all, this is a very serious university. Everybody who comes here immediately recognizes that. There are serious leaders at this university, and you immediately can recognize that when you meet with them. There's a commitment to excellence, and very importantly, there's a lot of passion. You see that passion at every respect of the university. Where else can you have a former president who knows exactly what you're doing, why you're doing it, and how you're doing it? Where else can you have a new president who perhaps can do what you're doing better than you? Where else can you have trustees that actually call you with ideas and advice and that help you travel through difficult challenges? Where else do you have the resources and the environment, the students and the colleagues, to pursue all of these ideas that you always wanted to pursue, but you could not pursue somewhere else? I think the answer is simple: nowhere else. Thank you all for coming, and I look forward to celebrating again next year and in the next 10 years what we accomplished together. Thank you very much.